Now we're just going to pick up from when I saw you guys last week, but today, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about really the three real categories for tort law. Kind of what we've done in the past is I've introduced these to you on a very brief kind of basis. Today we're going to have an opportunity to really just get into one of them. And even that, we're going to get into one side of one of these. So I want to just introduce them all to you first, and then we're going to talk about one. So first up, when we're talking about the three types of tort cases, the one that we're going to have a chance to get into today, and ever so briefly, is going to be intentional tort cases, or intentional civil cases. Again, remember they're basically interchangeable. For intentional cases, what this is saying is that an individual or group who wronged another individual or group did it knowing what they were doing, aware that there were going to be consequences, or at least should have known that there was potential for something going wrong. So I just used this one as an example here. This right here was a road rage incident where the person who was driving this car had their phone out, and I forget exactly how it started, but the guy in front of him gets out of his car with this tire iron, and the driver's filming this as it happens, and this guy takes the tire iron and smashes this guy's headlights and smashes up his car, and then he gets out of the car, and this guy hits him multiple times with the tire iron. So, of course, in this instance, you can see that yeah, this guy caused damage to the car, but he also hurt the individual. So he knew what he was doing, or at least should have known that hitting a car with a tire iron is probably going to break the headlights. This guy's going to be charged with both kinds of intentional tort. He's responsible for injury to person, because he hit this guy multiple times with a tire iron, sent him to the hospital. I think he almost died, if I remember right, but he didn't. He survived it. And he's also responsible for the damage that he caused to the car. So in this particular case, there are going to be actually a handful of lawsuits that can happen. You can sue him for the damage he did to the car, which you can point to and say, well, he broke this, he broke that, with labor and everything, it's going to cost, whatever, $2,000 to fix the car. But also, he seriously injured this other guy, sent him to the hospital. So you can sue him for the hospital bills and
emotional damages for the tire iron.
Absolutely. I can never see a tire iron again. So that's part of it. Pain and suffering, mental anguish, all sorts of other things. So you can sue him for a lot. Now, I do want to point something out. Is what he did a crime? Yes. So is he going to have to face criminal charges as well?
Yeah.
Yes. Charge him for criminal. That's the state who does it. And then you sue him for what happened. Now, we're going to get into these ones today, but I just want to introduce the other ones because we're going to come back to these later on. The next one we're going to talk about is what's called a neglect tort case. What neglect is saying is that basically you did not act to prevent something from happening. You did nothing, and you create a circumstance where someone can be harmed or killed. Now, there's kind of this classic example, and yeah, I'll go ahead and use this. It's sort of weird, actually. If your house has a pool, you have to do something to secure that pool. What I mean by that is you must have a fence around the pool. Now, like a fenced-in backyard, that counts. That's acceptable. But if you don't have it fenced in, what you have done is created a situation where someone could fall into your pool and drown. Now, I kind of get questions when I use this. This is why I was hesitant to use this one. Of people saying like, well, if you fall in a pool, it's your own fault. No, it's not. It's the owner of that pool's responsibility to secure it. So if it's not secured, you didn't do something to secure it. That's neglect. Yes, Amy?
Is this like, that pool off the PTC Boulevard with like the statues in front of it? That they put in the statues because people kept driving into the lake?
I think so, yeah, uh-huh.
that would be negligent if they didn't have the statutes, or is it still?
Wow, that's a tough one. I mean, I guess, don't hit this statue and don't drive into this lake. Yeah, probably, I would say so. They're doing something now. It's not a fence, it's kind of weird, but yeah, I guess so. Yes, Gabe?
Well, there's a sidewalk that's like right next to it going to it, and the case was some lady thought it was a road and she drove into it. And so they put like the little blocks there so people don't. Would that be negligence, especially since there's a sidewalk that goes into it?
Being that it's probably like the property of city and county, they're gonna say it's your fault for driving on the sidewalk. But could you sue for that? Yeah, potentially, it's possible. Again, because it's probably city and county, hard to go after the government. But yeah, I would say it's possible, sure. When did that happen?
Probably when it was really snowy. honestly.
Okay, what, was it recently? I don't think so. Okay,
The
all right.
statues have been there for years, it's just.
That's what I thought. Okay, all right. Well, maybe she has a case. But then you have to go admit to a jury you're dumb. Now, here's the deal. Third one we're going to talk about is going to be what's called strict liability. Now, what strict liability says, and be careful because we've talked about this for criminal as well. Strict liability says that you're doing something that's so dangerous, you automatically accept responsibility if something goes wrong. I give this example here. Owning a dangerous animal, like a dog with a bite history, you're strict liability responsible. So if that dog bites someone else, you might say, look, he hasn't bitten anyone in years. Doesn't matter. If he does it once, now you have a history of this. So it's strictly liable on you if your dog bites someone. Now, I use this example because when we get into this, I'll come back to it more. But the classic example is if you're demolishing a building, if you're the company responsible for bringing it down, that's so dangerous. If anything goes wrong, it's automatically on you. Now, I will explain more about these when we get further into it, but I just want to introduce these because today we're just going to talk about injury to person. We'll get to these ones in depth later. Now, before we go any further, are we good? Okay. Yes, Mom.
How much to pay the damages? Can the insurance money just like take care of it, or does it need to get your option?
Are you talking about like demolishing the building?
Well, no, for like the intentional cases, like if some guy just hits your car and says like, oh, just have your insurance.
Sure. Like car accident, something like that, yeah. It'd be the insurance company that says, our agreement is we're going to make them whole. Now, if you do this, insurance isn't going to pay for that.
It won't be for that. So you just can't go out.
And say, don't worry, State Farm will handle this one. No, because it's your fault, you're responsible. Usually, because insurance companies are very meticulous about this, where they say, we're responsible for this, and this. Anything else is on you. So you can't get out there and say, yeah, I hit the car with a tire iron, but Jake from State Farm, can you take care of this for me? That's going to be a tough one. Yes, Jake.
For strict liability, are things like the Olympics, for example, considered like strict liability, or like zip lining, or like things that pose like serious risk but aren't like that common?
Yes and no. And let me kind of say it like this. It actually kind of comes back to your question about like signing the waiver. It sort of limits their liability, kinda, because you accept the risk. But let me use the zip lining as an example because that's a great example because it's dangerous, but there are all these safety measures in place. If it was up to me, I'd say, no, that's not strict liability because you have safety harnesses and it's been tested and everything like that. If you're demolishing a building and if a brick falls on someone, it's like, hey, you can't protect from that. Zip lining you can to a certain extent. Good question. Now here's the deal. I do want to talk about some examples about tort that's injury to person. We'll talk property later on. We're just doing injury to person today. I want to give you an example where assault can be a civil or tort case. Now again, keep in mind, assault is also criminal. So if you do this, you can face criminal charges and you can get sued for it. Assault is a show of force. It's a threat. It can be movement of force. It can be a look of force. All that can be assault. Now, I kind of get questions usually too, where it's like, okay, so like, if you ball up your fist, is that assault? Yes. If you look at someone with anger, why are you looking at me with anger, Molly? I'm going to do it back to you. Okay, good. Now we're both guilty of assault. If I crumple up a piece of paper and throw it at you, did I get you?
You got my foot, you did.
Assault. That was good.
Thanks.
Now, Samira, this works out so well. Do a, ow, oh. Okay, so now we're both in this together. Because both of us just committed battery. Battery is just when there is actual physical touching. That piece of paper counts. So now, Samira, we have to go through the court system. And because I bruise like a peach, oh man. Oh, am I going to take pictures? I'm going to bring those in. I'm going to talk about the pain and suffering. Oh, it's going to be awful. So what this means is, now it's criminal and civil. Now I should probably ask, are Samira and I going to go to court over this? I mean, I am, but absolutely. This is where you kind of get into this gray area. Where you say, I mean, I guess by the definition of the law that, yeah, what just took place was assault and battery. Kinda. If you actually go to court, they're going to ask, okay, well then what's the definition? What's harmful contact? And they kind of rely on what they have used for other cases, and they do this in multiple instances, where they say, well, what would an average person say is in fact harmful contact? If you're sitting on a jury and you have two people there saying, well, he threw a piece of paper at me, and then she threw it back, I bet you're going to say, get me out of here. This is ridiculous. This is not what an average person would say is physical harm. Go home, you two, and I will go home with my bruise and my tears. Amy, a question?
Yes. If there's like Al Capone and like he has an enforcer like go scare someone for money, would Al Capone also be guilty of assault?
If you can directly connect it, yeah, but that's probably going to be a little tough.
Okay.
You'd have to have some kind of document, a recording, something like that, but it's possible.
All right.
Sure. Yes.
So, theoretically speaking, if somebody were to like give me a look, then I would be like, oh my god, it offended me, assault. And I could go to the court and ask them for like $1 million settlement.
Yep.
And then that side comes in saying, we'll give you like $1,000.
Yep.
Should I could just take that and
Take
like,
$1,000 to go away? Yes.
Jesus.
Now, how do you prove it? If you just say, oh, you looked at me, the court might say, okay, well, how? Where? It's your word against his? So, comes down, can you prove it? Yes.
If that piece of paper had like peanut butter smeared on it or something, and one of you are allergic to peanut butter,
That's what my lawyer's going to say. Absolutely, yes.
so that would be considered like harmful contact, or even if like you didn't know to like, you know.
What would an average person say? If, yeah, that's my peanut butter spread paper. Sent someone into anaphylaxis shock and they died. Wow. That would be a case where a jury's going, what is he doing with peanut butter on the paper?
Well, like if you eat a peanut butter sandwich and then you put your fingers down on the paper.
Okay.
That's a lot of peanut butter.
Possible. And now we got a wrongful death suit too. Oh boy, I should be careful where I put
Is
my peanut
wrongful
butter.
death, is wrongful death civil?
Yep.
Um,